verbally or written onto this big board that I need to share. And then Mark, I think you're going to record as well, right? So if you haven't already recorded, you can start now.
We just started recording.
Excellent. And can you see my screen?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. And then I'm just going to get situated with my Zoom functions. All right. And then, so you can hopefully see this board. So what we're going to be doing is sort of taking notes on this activity, going through a couple questions and making sure all of your comments and notes get transcribed on this board. I also want to mention that we have Lisa Costa Sanders in the room. She is also a consulting planner for the city, and she'll be sort of on standby to jump in on any particular questions that I'm not able to answer. So we are talking about open space tonight. And as Geeti sort of just highlighted very quickly, the concerns around open space and sort of the environmental conditions of our plan area are many. They are great. They are sort of existential, I would say, in some ways. And sort of the past legacy of industry in this area has created some sort of unique challenges with regard to water movement through the area, to toxicity of soil. So all of these things are concerns that we have heard from others, and I imagine we'll hear from some of you tonight. And the vision plan is an opportunity to look at these, to address these things. I think the other big thing at top of mind is just sort of the lack of open space in the area. There isn't really sort of formal gathering space, park space, and redevelopment presents an opportunity to imagine these uses coming into the district in a more holistic way. But what we need, as part of this visioning exercise, is to hear from you. What are the open space types, the amenities that you're looking to see? What would sort of complete this district as a useful part of the city that you would come and visit from an open space perspective? So I think that's enough for me. I guess the last thing I'll just say is, again, this is a vision plan. We're lucky in that this is really a chance to be free, creative, think big. We're talking like sky's the limit here. We are looking for all ideas. So no idea is crazy, and we don't need to get into all the details yet, which is nice. So on that note, I'm going to encourage folks who would like to answer this first question, which is, what do you like about open space and the environment in the area today? There must be something positive that you'd like to share. I can say quickly that when I did visit the plan area, I saw a family of ducks wandering through the creek, and I thought that was a really fun thing to see. So if you have something positive that you'd like to share, something you like about the area that you'd like to see preserved, go ahead and raise your hand. You can also start transcribing into the comments. And I see Debbie has her hand raised, so I'm going to unmute you, Debbie, if you're ready. And you can go ahead and unmute now if you're ready.
Yes, I like the fact that there's not a lot of high density building right on Polgus Creek or Belmont Creek. My property is on Polgus Creek, and we've experienced flooding and storm drain issues in the area. So I hope that any new construction that's right adjacent to the creeks will be lower density and will take into consideration groundwater and tidal backflow, and won't have basements. But I do like the fact that right now it's low density right next to the creeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. That was really insightful. I'm glad you picked up on the sort of the issue with surfaces and the sort of impervious nature. Like there's so much parking, sort of impenetrable surfaces that keep water from being able to sort of either go back down into the ground or sort of trickle to a better location. And so flooding is something that we really want to be mindful of, and how water is sort of moving around in the future. I'd also just want to mention, if folks have a comment about a particular area, to let us know so we can put it on the map, like Debbie did, mentioning the creek. All right, Chris, you're next. I'll ask you to unmute.
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Great. My comment is just that I enjoy the few trees that we have in the area and in the town, and would love to see even hundreds more of them put in where we could fit them with the appropriate species. I think it would be stronger for the canopy and actually attract more people and more users to be better shade cover.
Great, thank you, Chris. Yeah, it's interesting. There are actually a lot of trees in the area. They're scattered and they're not sort of coordinated, but there's some older growth. I think they might be redwoods. I mean, that you can tell that this is an area that has been around for a long time just by looking at some of the trees. Catherine, you're next. I'll ask you to unmute now.
I'm not sure that this goes exactly to your question, but when I have been in the area, especially when I'm near the highway, there is a lot of noise there. So of the highway traffic. And it just seems something to consider is how to mitigate that if there are going to be green spaces in the area.
Thank you. That definitely relates. And I'm glad you brought up the highway, because when we think about environment, right, it's not just about green things, it's about noise, it's what we hear. I mean, highways and sort of industrial fabric has an impact on habitat area and people too. So it's all very related. All right, Stephen Aguirre, I think you're next. I'll ask you to unmute now. Go ahead.
You know, I do this all day and you'd think I'd be an expert by now, but yeah, I saw some comment that kind of wrote what I was thinking, which was making the creek side a little bit more inviting to walkers, pedestrians, and whatnot. I really like that picture you have on D of a naturalized area along a creek bed. And I think not relating to this conversation tonight, but San Carlos has missed a big opportunity of having creekside walking along San Carlos Avenue because they allowed the neighbors to take over the space on both sides, and they put up 2 high fences that we can't really see the creek anymore. And so if there was an opportunity to kind of reclaim a little bit of some creek views in San Carlos, I think it'd be a great asset to the community.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen.
And I agree with the trees. Can't have enough trees.
Great, thank you. All right, the next person I have is, looks like Gail, you're next.
Yes, I agree with the comment about trees, but for you to keep in mind that the trees should be resistant to car exhaust, and they should also be trees that people aren't going to want to cut down in, let's say, 10 or 20 years. That's
Thank
my
you.
whole comment.
That's well said. Yeah, I mean, it's important to think about when we're putting trees in these places, like we want trees that are going to thrive. We want to have like a successful environment. So that's very well put. Next I have David Crabb.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
Yeah, I think on the trees, you should look at all the streets as an opportunity for tree-lined streets. I represent the Sierra Club, and we have a policy that we've put together that talks about green streets and how to design them. We have guidelines and so on, and I would highly recommend that the team look at that. It's Sierra Club's Loma Prieta Sustainable Land Use Committee. But it shows the streets not only being green with the trees, but also green with planting along the edges, similar to this lower one here for water solving stormwater drainage, that type of thing. So that's certainly one big thing. The other thing I'm concerned about is when we saw that flood map, that was scary. And I wonder what the thinking is in terms of how to deal with that. Now, it wasn't clear, was a lot of that flooding from Plugas Creek and any other creeks that are in the area, or was that sea level rise that they were planning on? Can you tell me that?
I can speak generally to the fact that I believe it's related to broader flooding, not specific necessarily to sea level rise, but it would be related to the creek. It's larger scale modeling that FEMA provides, looking at flood prone areas. So those were 100-year storms and 500-year storms, I believe.
Which these
So
years are every
the
5
short
years.
answer is that sea level rise is another compounding factor that we haven't even begun to address. Yeah.
Okay, then I would say that on the Pulgus Creek, I agree with the former, someone spoke about making it look nice like in section C there, which I agree, you know, really make it a nice area, but you've got to figure out how to deal with the flooding simultaneously. And so that's going to be a contradictory challenge there to try to work on.
Absolutely, but a worthy challenge.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, David. Next I have Chris Wussman.
Yeah.
Hi, Chris.
I am unmuted. Hi, thanks. I was not planning on making yet another tree comment, but I'm going to, because there's something that just happened in San Carlos that underscores the value that trees can provide to this kind of area. Just a little bit south on Howard, parallel to Britain, just on the other side of Home Depot and Lucky is Howard. And about a week and a half ago, I was driving down it from El Camino to Industrial. All of the beautiful trees lining Howard, most of Howard, were all chopped down. And this time of year, they would all be incredibly beautifully in white blossom. I just couldn't believe it. It was just like a war scene. I don't know how that was allowed to happen, but that's an example of moving in the wrong direction. And it just highlighted how beautiful those trees were lining that very similar street to what's in this innovation district. So you might note that as a negative example of what needs to be done, kind of reinforcing what everybody's saying about the trees. Now, the comment I wanted to make was about view lines. There are going to be other very tall buildings developed by these life science companies by Alexandria in this district, like the one that's going up on Industrial now. And they are going to block some view lines that currently exist. One of the nice things in the innovation district is you can see a lot of sky. But I will tell you, as a multifamily housing developer, that the preferred view direction in this area is to the mountains. That's generally people's favorite view direction because the mountains are beautiful and it's something you can see. And so in the planning, if there is a way to preserve some open view lines in that direction, that would help the overall environment of the planning and of the area. And then I did have one, if I may, Annie, one open space comment. I don't know if you're taking open space.
Yeah.
But it's a general one, but I feel strongly from having seen so many open spaces in new districts like this. It's not so much a matter of quantity as it is quality and design. In Mission Bay, which has some down south of Market, Mission Bay, most people know that. It's kind of a life science district with a lot of tall buildings. I think Perkins and Will was involved in the planning of it to some extent. There's open space there that works really well. And there's open space there that is not so heavily used. And there are lessons to be learned. It's all beautifully designed, but some of it's more used than others. So I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thank you. I'm really glad you mentioned the views actually, because that was something that struck me. I grew up further south down the peninsula in Palo Alto, and we don't have that relationship with the hillside. You know, we can't see the hills that are just, you know, they're part of our town, but we don't see them from our downtown. San Carlos has this very intimate relationship with the hills. They surround you, you get to see them. And I just think that's like a really powerful sort of.
It is.
Something to hold on to and celebrate further. Yeah.
Andy, if I could just add in on the trees that were removed, unfortunately, they were diseased trees and they were very problematic. So I think it's also important to consider what types of trees that are being planted in the area, make sure that they're native and, as somebody else said, can thrive in this district. So thank you.
thanks for letting us know. Thanks for clarifying that, Lisa. That's nice to know.
Yeah, and they will definitely be replanted. I'll let you know that as well.
Like the heart being ripped out, I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's pretty harsh.
Great. All right, next we have Dane Conklin. And I should just add that we can be free flowing. So folks can also start to talk if they have things that they are looking to see improved or better. You know, we don't need to stay on this first question. So Dane, go ahead.
Sure. And there was some discussion, Annie, about the buildings and the parking lots coming right up against the creek and so forth. And if we had put more thought, perhaps back in 50 years ago, into putting the pervasive concrete or pervious concrete or drainage systems into the creek and green space into the creek, that would have helped. And if you want to take a really good look at someone who's done some fantastic jobs with their downtown creek, take a look at San Luis Obispo, about 200 miles to the south. It's not as, it's deeper than our little creek is, but it's a great example of what can be done.
Great reference. I went to Cal Poly, so that I'm biased, but I think that's an excellent creek and definitely something that we can learn from. All right. Next, we have someone who's listed their name as Kay Goforth.
Hi, yeah, first name is Kathleen, sorry.
No problem. Hi.
So yeah, I was holding off speaking for a while because we were on that first question, and I honestly struggled because there's, from an environmental standpoint, really nothing that I like about that area. But I would second all the comments about restoring the Pulgas Creek riparian area. I would love to see that, and opened up and made available as a community amenity and as a habitat area. We've kind of closed off all of our creeks, and people don't even know they're there half the time. I was going to say that it would be helpful to see an overlay of flood maps and what sea level rise is going to do. I'm sorry, I came in a little bit late, so I didn't realize. Sound like that may have already been, well, you saw some map apparently of flooding, but the sea level rise really needs to be considered. And I'm pretty sure the city already has that in the, at least is developing that through the climate mitigation action planning process. And I think that's a very important thing to factor into this. Because as I recall, this whole area is likely to be underwater. Let's see, in terms of the tree planting, I was going to advocate, and I will definitely strongly advocate that the emphasis be on planting native species. And I think I heard Lisa say that that would be a priority, which I was a little surprised to hear, because the city's current approved list of approved street trees does not include a single native species on it. But I would like to see, when you're developing open space, make it habitat, not just open space. There's a lot of open space that I've seen that is just so sterile, and it's full of, tropical or Southern California species. Let's make it something that is appropriate for the place and that enhances habitat as well as space for people. I think that was all I had.
Thank you. That was excellent. I'm glad you ended on a high note with the, places for habitat, not just for people. I think that's very much in line. I know with the landscape practice that Perkins and Will brings, we're not looking at, when we think about successful public open spaces, they can't just be ornamental, right? There has to be some value there. And especially in a location like this, where the environmental conditions are so troublesome, we need our open spaces to do more than just be pretty things to look at. Absolutely.
Oh, and just one other
All right.
comment, just one quick comment also, because this is an area with an industrial history, it would be helpful to know if there are contaminated sites that need to be dealt with here, and how that might affect, what can be done. And on my comment about making habitat not just for people, I see creating habitat as being good for the people as well. It's good for people's mental health to be in natural areas.
Yes. Excellent point. All right, next we have Sam Hertzberg. Oops.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
I live in the Greater East San Carlos neighborhood, past co-president of that neighborhood association. So I have a lot of history and knowledge of the east side there. So I have a variety of comments. Polgus Creek is pretty badly contaminated. I've led creek cleanups there previously. It has a lot of toxics and PCBs. Would really like that whole creek to be restored. It may need to be completely dredged and redone, and the floodplain expanded, and as mentioned, revegetated with native species. I love the idea, the concept of a linear trail, but I don't want the trail to be at the expense of the creek. The creek should be the highest priority, and the trail should be a walking trail and not a bike trail necessarily. I love the idea of more trees and native trees and drought tolerant trees. And I also, I think there's an opportunity for non-potable water to be brought over from the Redwood Shores area to help water some of these trees. We're all paying for the sewer improvements there. We should get some of the benefits of non-potable water. In terms of improving walkability, would like to see the East Side Connect project be completed, including the undergrounding of utilities along Old County Road. We do have a deficit of green space, and I do appreciate Chris's comments about quality, on green spaces and gathering locations. There's the school district acquired land in front of Loreola Park, and the community, the residents in that community really do not think that's the best location for a school, and would like to see a school location identified so that could be a future expansion of Loreola Park for the community. So if that's something that could be considered when you're considering land uses, that would be appreciated. Reduction of noise, being an industrial area right next to residential has had its problems over the years. There was even a point during the general plan, it was so noisy that the city was considering accepting a higher noise standard for our neighborhood than other parts of the city, which we didn't like. And they kept it at the same noise standard as everybody else. And we would like to see noise reduced and for everybody who's working and living there. Height of buildings, this was a big issue with the transit village. And one of the reasons why it was reduced in size was because of the view of the hills. And so views up and downhill are important to everybody. And just in terms of flooding and cleanup, it's important to recognize you can build a levee for sea level rise, but there's also water that comes up through the ground. And we do have a legacy of contaminants in this area, and would like to see, as these sites are redeveloped, that these sites are completely cleaned up and not just capped. Because if the water comes up, it's going to have stuff in it that none of us are going to appreciate that has a legacy in the ground. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. That was very thorough. I appreciate you breaking them into themes for me. That helped with my note taking.
Sure.
All right, we've got about 5 minutes left, and I do see that David and Gail have their hands up. So maybe David and Gail, quick comments, and then I want to just kind of wrap up before, so you can move on to your next rooms. So we'll start with David.
Okay, real quick. I was just actually typing it in the chat here.
Oh, great.
I think one thing you have to consider that the city might have to think about maybe purchasing some of the private property there to actually do these open spaces that you need. Some of it will be, they can require when these big buildings go in that they be part of the project, but I think the city might want to have its own independent park or area, especially if we want, I don't know if we'd want playgrounds there, but kind of a nice open space of some kind. So that's one thing I had. I was just typing in, I agree with Sam Hertzberg's comment. We should underground all the utilities in that area, if possible. And lastly, quickly, do you know the permeability of the soil in that area in terms of natural drainage? We're talking about flooding. Can we use natural swales to drain it, or is the soil just not acceptable for that? That's it. Thank you.
Great. I can't answer that in specificity right now, but we'll be looking further into all those types of sort of stormwater conveyance in the future. Gail?
Okay, regarding the school, a few years ago, that piece of land was thought of as a place to build a school. I thought that was sort of disregarded and kind of thrown away because of the what the kids would be exposed to, all the air pollution. And that's what makes it a really bad idea.
Lisa Costa Sanders, yeah, do you want to?
I can respond really quickly if you want. So the San Carlos Elementary School District passed on that site that's adjacent to Loyola Park. And I think if you longtime residents, you know that adjacent to Loyola Park used to be an elementary school that was closed. But the Sequoia Union High School District does still own property adjacent to the school that they were considering making a charter school. My understanding is based on what's going on in Redwood Shores at Oracle, that they may no longer need to utilize that site as a charter school, but they have not released the property yet, and they're still considering it. But at this point, it's not high on their priority list, is what I've heard.
Great. So you're all going to be notified shortly that you can move on to your next room. You are welcome to stay in this open space room if you want to keep discussing this with us. We're basically going to repeat the exercise with new people who join. But before you go, I wanted to just kind of quickly touch on some of the chat comments that came in, because I know I was only hearing what people were saying and not getting to read all the comments. So I'm just going to zoom in. It looks like there's, yes, flooding and sea level rise, huge concern. What else do we have? The cement plant, yep, a notable landmark. Biking on Old County Road needs improvement, too scary to bike there. Yeah, so thinking about sort of how this corridor of Old County Road kind of serves people better. And then a lot of comments on the creek, which is great. I'm very heartened to see that people also kind of see the creek as this unique asset for the area, and maybe it's not at its greatest potential right now, but that's why we have a vision plan. And then hopefully people can kind of see these photos that we have here. I just wanted to zoom in so you can get a sense. These are just sort of examples of ways we might try to think about different types of open space in the future. And certainly something we'll want to talk with you about at our next workshop. But we, before you all go, wanted to let you know that we will be sending out a survey in the next couple days that sort of follows up on this conversation. So you may see some of these photos again, and we'll have another opportunity to kind of weigh in on your reactions. So on that note, I think you will soon be free to go to your next meeting. I don't quite know when it's going to happen. But if folks want to stick around, please do. We'll kind of keep this conversation going with new people that join. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Annie, can you hear me?
Thank you, Annie.
I can.
Hi,
Hi.
Annie. Just a quick question. I put it in the comments, but maybe within the purview of your team, we could look at sustainability of the new plans in terms of encouraging recycling or encouraging limited electricity use. Those sorts of things aren't really open space, but they definitely impact the environment of the development.
Absolutely. Yeah, sort of more higher performance green building standards and
well,
low
giving
impact
preference to
design.
designs that incorporate that, right?
Yep, right. Thank you.
I don't know if this is for you or for the circulation one, but like if there is a way of designing the green space in a way that allows people to get to Caltrain without cutting through the existing neighborhoods. You know, we have small kids, we live on Cherry Street, and the last thing I want is for like everyone who's going to work to cut through our neighborhood. If there's a way to create like pathways that seem more enjoyable to walk down than existing neighborhoods, you know, for safety purposes or whatever, I think that would be also nice if it could be.
Yeah. And
yeah.
are
you, did you just, oh, sorry. I was just going to say, did you just join our open space group? You should go to the circulation table next because they will talk about those things. Excellent comment. Yep.
But also,
thank
if you
you.
look at Commercial Street underpass, I don't think that's widely utilized. And I think there's a really good opportunity to expand on that because it is very close to accessing downtown and the train station.
And I documented that comment, so thank you. So we've got it here as well.
Thanks. Do we just choose our breakout room and go there now? Is that what you want to?
Yep, you're free to go.
How do we do that?
I just add one comment, picking up on what I think it was Chris said about sustainability. I would also like to see some consideration of this area being kind of energy self-sufficient. Is there, possibility to make this, kind of a microgrid? Obviously there's requirements for solar on buildings, but getting batteries and doing a microgrid kind of thing might be good.
Yes, absolutely. You're picking up on the sort of important scale at which we're planning, right? We're planning at a district scale. And so there's a lot of opportunity to think much sort of holistically and as a system about how different environmental sort of moves can be made, whether it comes to energy, water usage, all of these things. We have a lot more flexibility when we think about it in a larger area.
And is there a way that could also perhaps provide support for the neighboring residential areas? If not everybody there can have solar on their rooftops, but a lot more self-generation of energy could be built into the innovation district. Perhaps there could be some synergy or mutual support there.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a perfect way to put it. Mark, I've now moved down to board 2. Are you tracking, or where are your comments? Okay.
I just started comments that I'm hearing. I'm just putting on board 2 right now.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can kind of transition. So I think I'm just sort of looking at the participant list. I think we lost some people, but we may have gained some new ones. So if you're just joining us, I'm Annie Ryan. I'm an urban designer at Perkins & Will. Welcome to the Open Space and Environment breakout room. We're happy to have you. We're going to be talking generally. Oops, and I'd ask you to just mute yourself if you've just joined.
Real quick, Annie, if anyone needs help moving to a different breakout room, you can put that in the chat and we can help you move there. Thank you.
Yes, please do. So welcome to the open space room. If you've probably got the gist of things after being in another room already, we're kind of going through these 3 questions at the top of the board. What do you like? What could be better? And what would you like to see in the future? Open space is a tricky one because we don't have a lot of open space right now in the plan area. So there may not be a lot of things that you really like, but we've been talking, the past group talked a bit about views, about the creek that is sort of an underutilized asset right now, and the desire to see sort of even more trees. There are some trees in the area now, but they're maybe not as loved and sort of continuous as we would like to see. So I'm going to ask folks, it looks like we've already got someone with a hand up. So Tim, you'll start first, but if people can start raising their hands if they want to share a comment about something that they like in the plan area, please do so. So Tim, I'll start with you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for having us and thanks for running this meeting. We really appreciate it. I live in Greater East San Carlos, been a resident here for almost 20 years. And by far and away, the very first thing is that there needs to be more open space on the east side. Loyola Park does not cut it. And I have just watched year after year since the transit villages come in, the park's just overwhelmed. You can't even go and I can't even throw a football with my kids on a weekend because the space is so packed. So, when we're talking about developing this area, and we're talking about apps like Alexandria is $1 billion company. We're talking about these $1 billion companies coming in here. San Carlos has and should force these companies, because if a company doesn't want to come here because we're forcing them to help us build another park, there's going to be 20 other companies behind them wanting to do that. So this is more towards San Carlos. They need to step up. They need to get a nexus with fees and direct donations and direct establishment of more green areas in East San Carlos, not just for the people living in East San Carlos, but for the whole community. A skate park, a pool. I mean, we have the ability right now with just what we're doing with this quote development to get those things. So more green space, get a skate park in here. We've been talking about a skate park forever. This is a perfect area for that. Get a pool. These companies can pay for that. Also, the creek. You mentioned that the creek has come up. Make a walkable area. You want to make sure and really have that creek has just been destroyed. So these companies need to come in and help us with that. There is money there, and there's going to be willingness from companies to do this if it's proposed in the right way. The last thing I'm going to say, and this is more about circulation, but when we're talking about a green path, a green space path that maybe runs from, the south single family homes along Hall Street somewhere, or out by Old County, kind of cutting through all the way down to Britain. Let's put a green path in. So again, park space, have these companies pay for that. They can. Let's make another park. Get a pool in here, get a skate park in here, and have green space, walkways, and bikeways. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Yep.
It's really helpful to get into that specificity. So it sounds like a lot of the open spaces that you're looking for are active, like more sort of recreation type open spaces, which is great. And then also some interest in seeing the creek kind of be a more focal point for the area.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, next we've got Ben Fuller.
Hello, everybody, and thanks so much for doing this meeting. It's great that you guys are putting this together, and the format's working really well. I used to be the president of Greater Area San Carlos from 2008 to 2016 before Dimitri took over, and I'm still on the board. And the environment is a really huge issue. So Greater East San Carlos and this entire zone was built with cars in mind. It's really a car-focused area. And the city was actually able to be really successful, and they got a $3.5 million project funded to build what's called East Side Connect. And the idea of that is to connect the east and west parts of San Carlos. And there's still some key areas that are not connected yet. So this idea of having more green trees that you guys just mentioned is a great idea. Currently, the trees here are not very well maintained. They're either overwatered or underwatered or just not appropriately maintained. And so that's something we really care about. And then making this new project kind of connect into the existing community. So there's a huge opportunity up and down Old County Road to build into some of the existing projects so you don't have to do it all at once. I wanted to make a couple other points as well. One is the heating building that's right next to the park. This was acquired by the school. The school tried to basically take over the park a few years back by buying that heating building and then trying to use the park as their school fields. And the community fought that and they lost. And so we think it's a great opportunity to buy that building and to expand the Loyola Park in the green space, and then to have all these pocket parks and other green spaces throughout. And then the last thing I'm going to mention is the creek is really it's an abomination. It was used for many years for dumping. Pet Boys still, they're the people that go there, they still throw cigarettes in there and car parts. Kelly Moore, they trashed that creek. It's got some really bad chemicals in it. So the idea of rebuilding the riparian corridor, which allows fish to hang out, and a different corridor that's green to grow in the river area, and to build that into a walkable creek would be incredible. And San Carlos is just, I can't even believe we have a creek like that in this city. It's so unfortunate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. That was great. And Lisa, do you want to just mention something about the school so we can, because this also came up in our last group.
Oh, sure. Just to clarify, I think Ben's pretty familiar with the area, but the San Carlos School District at one point looked at purchasing the property and locating an elementary charter school there. They decided to pass on that a while ago, but Sequoia Union High School District did buy the property, as Ben indicated. They were interested in putting a charter high school there. Our priorities seem to have shifted a bit as the charter school in Redwood Shores has been meeting some of those student population needs, but they still own the property. The city has definitely expressed interest to them to acquire it once they're ready to dispose of the property, and that just has not occurred yet.
And just how did they ever get the property in the first place? Like, how could that possibly happen?
They purchased it with bond funds.
I know, but it's like, now we're in this situation. We got to fix it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. All right, we have another hand, Susan and Craig Norris. Go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Hi there. One of the things obviously we would like to see more open space and landscaping in whatever is done in this area. I want to make sure that somebody has on their radar that there's a difference between landscaping and having kind of just an open field. Like, I know it's maybe outside the study area, but the Palo Alto Medical Foundation, that building just to the north of In-N-Out Burger, has a really nice kind of weedy field, and maybe they think that's a really good way to landscape, but that's actually just created a huge environment for rodents. And so I feel like people, there needs to be experts that are involved with maybe doing some kind of landscaping that is more natural and uses plants that are more native to California and can do well in a drought, and maybe help the butterfly population that's crashing, but also isn't just a field where a whole bunch of rodents can live when they're near houses and near areas, because I feel like people have, that hasn't been looked at. And so and the other thing is that when industrial was redone several years ago, we live on Montgomery Street, we've lived here 33 years. All of the streets, all of the residential streets at the end that kind of abut to industrial, all got nice plantings, except Montgomery Street. Nothing was put there. And it's kind of an eyesore because a bunch of weeds grow there. I also just wonder how much the city has control over what businesses are places, because the business that has taken over the southeast corner of Industrial and Hawley, that hauling company, it's really an eyesore, and there's constantly big piles of dirt that are blowing all over the place when they pile it in their yard and then the wind comes along. So, that's just something that I think that could be done better, to just pay attention to, not just planting something that's drought tolerant or letting a field go to weed, but to actually think about, plantings that need water, but a little bit of water, but that maybe aren't rodent friendly.
Thanks, Susan. Those were all such excellent comments. And this touches back on a conversation we were having in the last group about sort of how we think about more drought tolerant sort of native plantings that are meant to be here and actually provide sort of an ecological value, right? That we're not just talking about ornamental planting because it looks good, but we want to actually do something that is meaningful to this place, that provides habitat area, that restores, to the extent possible, kind of restores the ecological systems of this place. And I also just wanted to mention something that you touched on, is this idea of open space being more useful. We've heard in feedback from some of the business owners that they have staff who at their lunch break, there just isn't really anywhere for them to go and eat their lunch outside. So they'll eat in their cars, they'll eat at their at their workspace, and like that sort of lack of space for someone to just kind of go and be in nature, I think is something that is also sort of important, that we want to think about. It can be small spaces too, but it really means a lot to people to be able to go outside and connect with nature in the middle of your day. Great. We had another hand. Oh, Thomas, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Thomas Knudsen. I have property on East San Carlos and Industrial inside of the development zone here. One of the things I wanted to talk about is how we can better perhaps incorporate on larger building sites a little more open space for the buildings that are going to be built. And I live in San Francisco, and the city planners there have a process by which they encourage narrow and taller buildings as opposed to shorter and fatter buildings, which makes more room on the ground for things like a parklet or an area where the employees of that building can be outside. I kind of point to the new property on Industrial Road as maybe being not quite there because, for example, they have a huge parking lot in the back of the building, but they didn't add an extra story to have outdoor space on it, which is something that they have done in San Francisco. And that might be something we can look at perhaps as we move further away from the airport. We can ask or trade off with developers to say you can go higher, but the building has to have a smaller footprint, maintaining the same FAR. And that would probably mean a change to the zoning ordinances, but that might be, if it was far enough away from the residential areas, I think that might have a positive effect on the amount of available space left for things like a green grass lawn or a tree grove or something like that. It's an outdoor space where people can hang out. And then the last thing I'll say is maybe if there's a way to encourage more developers to put in underground parking, and I use as my example the Presidio, where all the parking in the Presidio is underground, and on top of that parking, they put a very nice park for all San Franciscans to enjoy, and you hardly know that there's cars there at all because they're all parked under the ground. It's not cheap, but the everlasting effects provide tremendous value for the neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. Those were great comments. I just want to, we're obviously, this is our first workshop, so we're early in this process, but the topic of trade-offs, thinking about how maybe in order to get certain types of open space might require a different way of thinking about the buildings is something really important to think about and something that we'll want to continue to get feedback from the community on, where our values stand and what we'd be willing to do in exchange to get different types of open space incorporated into the district. All right, I don't see any other hands up. Does anyone have something they want to share and they were just waiting for the moment to do it? Now would be your time. And if not, we can go to the comment. I don't know, Mark or Sarah, you've been looking at more at the chat. Are there any topics that have been coming up that maybe we could just sort of discuss as a group?
While you're doing that, Annie, if I could just comment on the project on the corner of Industrial and Holly at 501 Industrial. It's currently utilized by Peninsula Hauling and Demolition. I will let the code enforcement officer know to take a look at that and let him know that there's too much dust in the area. So I appreciate that comment. And that is also a temporary use. The city currently has an application for a hotel at that location. And I believe the developer will be conducting some neighborhood outreach shortly.
Annie, I think what's interesting about this group compared to maybe our first session was there was a lot of discussion in our first session around, well, the creek and the riparian habitat and creating spaces maybe around existing natural features. And what's really interesting about this session is they're talking about, I'm hearing a lot of conversation around leveraging new development to create new open spaces or just to create new community benefits in general, whether it's an outdoor space by allowing for additional height or thinking about renewable energy and creating new opportunities for burying utilities to help create a more comfortable public realm. It's really interesting to see that with new development and new activity that's going to be coming into the district, that there can be this opportunity. And what we're hearing in the future is to create new places for people.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, that's really interesting to see the distinction between the groups. I don't know if folks have been able, I'm going to zoom in. I hope this doesn't give anyone motion sickness, but I'm going to zoom in a little bit on these images. These are just sort of precedent examples of different types of open space. Can you hear me? I don't know when I got muted, but as we sort of move further along in our visioning process, we'll want to start to think through like, well, what types of open spaces are we talking about? So like Mark mentioned, in the first group, there was a lot of conversation around a more naturalized sort of riparian corridor, maybe more quieter sort of naturalized open spaces, a place for reflection, a place to kind of be with nature when you're in the middle of a city. That seems appropriate to think about along the creek, perhaps. But there are other types of open space that can kind of come together to create sort of a bigger network. So that can be really small pieces like we see. I think this is a photo from San Francisco, but I'm sure all of you have experienced parklets in some way, especially now in this COVID era, right? We're seeing these sort of street transformations where communities are saying, actually, we don't really need all of that street level parking. We might be okay with giving up some of it and then having a place to sit or eat, or again, sort of be surrounded by more greenery than we would have otherwise been able to. Other examples, you know, when we think about outdoor space as having a purpose, I know some people have brought up examples like Mission Bay, where there's these large open spaces that maybe don't feel successful, they don't feel well used, or they don't really feel like they're all that great to sort of be in throughout the day. And so we want to think really critically about, gathering spaces as outdoor space. How can we design and incorporate these spaces that bring people together, that have a purpose, whether it's, events or getting lunch or pop-up, sort of games, whatever it wants to be, like being really intentional about what will make these open spaces sort of well-loved in the community. I think that's something we're also kind of looking to explore in this vision process. And then I think parks and playgrounds is pretty self-explanatory. So I don't know if anyone else wants to share anything now. We've got a couple minutes before we wrap up and do our final sort of 30-minute breakout group.
I got something I'd like to share that I'm putting in the chat. Yeah, so we went to the workshop for the Alexandria project and the current one that's in there. And developers have a very keen way of saying, oh, you want open space? Okay, well, we're building this beautiful courtyard inside of our building area, and that's going to suffice for open space. And that just does not cut it. The city needs to step up and be willing to ask for more money and to create a direct nexus from those increased fees to parks and to green areas. That needs to happen. It just needs to happen. And the city has not done that. There have been many opportunities for the city to get a lot more in mitigation funds that they have not done. So the city needs to step up and do that, because like I said, if a company comes in and says, no, we're not going to do that, there's going to be 20 other companies. San Carlos is right in between San Jose and San Francisco. It is the most, this area we're talking about is the most desired developable area in the whole Bay Area by far.
Andy, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question to that? I'm just curious, Tim, if we were to collect the fees like you indicate, where do you see a good place for the parks to go? Or alternatively, would you prefer that, for example, the Alexandria development had the parks more on the outward side of the development rather than on the interior side of the development?
Well, first of all, I think that the city should put in a nexus to the point that the developers are coming in and actually buying a small plot of land somewhere. Okay, they're going to buy a small plot of land to actually build a public park, so where we can build a public park. I don't want to see green space outside of an 8-story building. I would like to see a park somewhere that's walkable from our neighborhood in East San Carlos, from White Oaks, where they can walk through Arroyo and come down. I would like to see these companies buy the property for a pool and for a skate park. This fee stuff that we're talking about has never worked. I've been here for 20 years, and the only thing that I've seen, which was very little, was from fees that the city has done, which I really appreciate, is the East Side Connect project. And yeah, put in a new playground at Loyola. That supposedly there was some money from fees there. But when we're talking about fees, the fees don't work. What we need is an extreme commitment from a company like Alexandria that says, yes, we'll buy this little portion here, and the city and our company will help build a park here. There needs to be some kind of collaboration with that. just having them pay fees to the city, and we lost $600. You know, I know Lisa, I think it was Lisa that said in the other meeting that, you know, hey, this $600 or this $600,000, well, the city didn't take that. Well, it's in the city's general fund. Nothing has been done with that $600,000 in fees. It's been years. It's been almost a decade, and we haven't seen it. So there needs to be something different than fees. Does that kind of make sense at all?
Yeah, because I know as part of this overall process, we're going to be talking about community benefits and what are the community's priorities. And so the question was, would you like to see the parks on site or off site? And it sounds like your comment is off site.
Absolutely off site. Yeah, because again, these cities are saying, oh, well, we're building a courtyard here. That's going to suffice for our commitment to open space. That does not work. And I think what you're hearing and what I'm hearing from a lot of people here, they agree with that. You know, a courtyard would be nice, but I'm not going to go to the Alexandria building and walk into their courtyard, have to walk all the way around to go into a supposedly green area that has a couple of little restaurants there. That's not worth it. And the thing is it doesn't benefit anybody. We need to find things that benefit all of San Carlos. Skateboard park, a swimming pool, another park that could have a baseball field and a soccer field. You know, that benefits everybody. I'm not just talking about us in Greater East San Carlos, you know, because everybody's going to be impacted by this.
Thanks, Tim. I mean, this is really, really well put and framed. And what I'm also hearing, not just to benefit everybody, but that these types of open spaces that you're describing, these are like landmark features, right? Like this is a real sort of community gesture, right? That this is a skateboard park. It's San Carlos's skateboard park, right? Like it's something that is sort of known and becomes a symbol in and of itself. So that's really important for us to be hearing. Thank you.
Yeah, it needs to be for everybody. Everybody. Yep.
Well, we have a minute or so left. If anyone else, before you move on to your final room of the night, if you want to share any comments, anything you've been holding up until now, please feel free. Otherwise, we will move on to the next group.
And I'm guessing you figured out how to navigate moving from room to room because you got here, but if not, feel free to put that in the chat and we can help you get to where you need to go. Thank you.
Great. All right, I'm going to move us down to our third board. Wow, these are really filling up. This is so fun to see. All right, so if you're just joining us, welcome to the open space group. I'm going to zoom in here. Hopefully by now you kind of get how this is working. We're using this big map and going through a couple questions on different themes. So we're going to be talking about tonight or here in this room, our thoughts on open space, what we think is sort of an asset today in the area, what we'd like to see in the future, any issues or concerns, things that we think could be better. Just to give a little recap of what some of the other groups have discussed, the creek has been something that's come up pretty regularly. I think folks are interested in the potential for sort of reimagining, revisioning this creek a bit as a more naturalized riparian corridor that sort of honors or reflects what it is, which is a creek and habitat area. So seeing some sort of landscaping and design there that connects people to nature. Another topic that has come up a lot is sort of the environmental legacy in this area, right? That we've had a history of a lot of industries and factories in the area that have done, real damage in terms of dumping and creating toxicity issues in the soils. So thinking about, the potential that this vision plan holds to do some sort of restoration and sort of giving new life to this area from a sort of environmental and ecological standpoint. And then the last thing I would mention is just parks overall. The east side in general, it has sort of a lack of open space, and then this district in particular has no sort of formal open space. And so we've been talking a lot about what's the type of open space or types of open spaces that would be most beneficial to the community. Are these sort of recreation spaces, like the idea of a skate park has come up? Are these also smaller spaces maybe where someone can stop to eat lunch with a friend? I mean, there's a whole sort of range of scales that we could consider. And so understanding what people are interested in is a crucial part of this visioning exercise. So with that spiel, you know the drill. Please, if you'd like to share a comment, something that you like, something that you don't like, something that you'd like to see in the future, please raise your hand and then I'll call on you. And you are also more than welcome to use the chat window. All of your comments are going to go up on our board here. And if you could please mute yourself if you're not speaking, that would be wonderful too. All right, we've got Dimitri. Go ahead.
Oh gosh, I'm the first person.
You're first, you win.
Well, I guess. Yeah, so I want to echo the points about Polgus Creek. This is a unique opportunity to restore it, to get it cleaned up. And it's for everyone's benefit, because the amount of PCBs and other environmental pollutants that are that work towards the bay, the city actually gets fined for that, and it's really important for us to I think this should be an anchor point to think about restoring it and creating some pathways along it and make it a destination point. I think would be a key kind of anchor for us. One thing that it kind of overlaps with with environment is, we've had some discussions about, it's kind of hard to separate environment and the traffic, right? So we have this giant railroad spur that got built but never was used. And there's an opportunity for that to become a bike and pedestrian walkway and to use the railroad right-of-way to get to the new developments on the east side. So that's something that should be thought about and could really increase. It could be a benefit to both residents who live there and people who would be working here in the future. So I think that's really critical, and some sort of balance between the height of these buildings and getting some amount of open space here, because you can't just do all infill and maximize what developers want in terms of fattening their bottom line. We have to think about the people who will be working here and the people who live here, how we can make this kind of like a destination for the city as a whole, not just for the folks who work there. So I'm excited about the prospect of bike and walking lanes through the train sort of right away, which I think would benefit everybody. And then also not to overly belabor the point, but San Carlos's toxic legacy is something that no one should be proud of. The fact that so much dumping was allowed, the fact that many of these owners of the land were, we need to hold them liable. So whether it's L3, whether it's the other owners of the industrial properties, that the burden should not fall upon the residents of the city for the few folks who made the profits. So if these folks allowed for dumping to occur, then they should pay for that. So I think we'll stop there.
That was great. Thank you so much, Dimitri. I just want to make sure folks are clear on what you were referring to with the rail corridor. So folks, I'm going to zoom in slowly to not give you motion sickness, but there are these sort of former rail spurs that sort of transect through the plan area. And the general plan, or sorry, the bicycle and pedestrian master plan from I think just the last year or two that the city did, identified those routes or identified those right of ways as potentially potential areas for bicycle and pedestrian connections. And I think it's important to bring it up in the open space room as well, because open space is about connections too, right? I mean, these are not just sort of paths that people can go on. They can also be landscaped habitat areas that move critters and move different species that kind of improve the ecological and natural systems of our plan area. So thinking about those corridors, not just as circulation, but also as open spaces is a really important way to think about potential. So thank you, Dimitri. Anyone else want to raise your hand and we can unmute you? Did anyone want to respond to anything that Dimitri said? He had some really, really great points being made about the creek, about the sort of history of kind of environmental degradation and the opportunity to sort of turn a new leaf when we think about sort of environmental design and development in our plan area. Scott, I'm gonna call on you now. Go ahead.
Thanks. So yeah, I agree with everything that Dimitri said. I think that there's a huge opportunity here for cleaner land to be gotten out of this plan. I like the idea along the creek. Just the idea of maybe having a connection to Caltrain that actually runs along the side of the tracks for a little bit and then uses the spur to cross Old County Road and then comes down to grade level, so that people will be able to get to the train station from this area without having to necessarily walk along Old County Road or have to try and cross Old County Road. They could actually just go up and over to be able to get to Caltrain. I think open space is always a great thing. I think it should be a complete mix of open spaces. There will be times when people want a small area, just, a couple of picnic tables. There are other times when larger areas such as open space that could be used for a soccer field on weekends would be extremely useful also. So I think there should be a mix of all of these. And I think that if the amenities are there, you may actually see people from the neighborhood walk down into this area. I walk down in this area pretty much every day, but I think you'll see a lot more people walking down to use these amenities that are there. So I think one concern that we saw in one of the other breakout rooms is the idea of rooftop patios and things like that. I think we should keep those to a very bare minimum, because the noise from those will spread out around to the entire city. And the last thing I'm going to say is, not only do I think that the residents north of this will migrate down and actually use this area as the amenities from it, but you may actually start seeing people coming from the west side who live in the downtown and that area coming over to this area as a place to come and have dinner, or as a place to have a quiet little space. And so I think this is an opportunity to really connect both the east and the west side of the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. That was really well put. I like the idea of like, we need to remember that our open spaces can be destinations themselves, right? So having them have sort of a prominent, clear presence is really important to bringing people in. I see Brittany, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you so much for organizing. I think somebody was kind of speaking to this right as I joined the room, but I just wanted to put in a comment in favor of kind of more density in certain areas to give us more green space elsewhere. So it's definitely a trade-off. Right now, this area is pretty single story and pretty flat. And like somebody said in part of the maybe public chat, it's kind of, just filled with concrete. And I think, people have expressed preferences here in the chat for a certain limit on building, but I would really encourage us to think about that trade-off. So when you do put more in a taller building or kind of a more dense development, you do get more parks and spaces and things like that elsewhere in the community. Really excited to see what happens here in the area. Thanks.
Thanks, Brittany. Any other comments? Anyone want to react to what you've heard recently? I mean, you don't have to have like a new idea. You can give kudos to what you've heard or disagree. Sonia, go ahead.
Yes, I want to echo what Brittany just said. I'd love to see more, height. I agree that with height can come more opportunities for spreading out, and especially if it's done conscientiously and, to retain light. I think that we can reimagine our view of what a community looks like if it's done conscientiously. And I want to thank her for that comment.
Great, thank you. Dimitri, do you want to, this is a new comment, right? I think.
Yeah, for
Great.
sure.
Great.
Yeah, it's a interesting and perplexing, perhaps to very difficult balance in terms of height. And I think one way to help mitigate that is to have a real aggressive tree program for the existing single family neighborhood. That's a pretty cheap way to go. And many of the streets really don't have the that extra, I forget what you call it, but the planter strip. So the city has done some things on industrial where you kind of do this sort of like kind of cutout, and then you can plant a tree that's on the street. So if we make as a decision sort of community to allow for increased height, or what close to the heights that the developers are asking for, then we have to sort of temper that with really increasing the amount of trees and foliage throughout the community, and not just our existing single family neighborhood, but also with any developments that are being planned, because that's a good way to A, to buffer, and B, to help mitigate and maybe improve the issues with I forget what you call it, but when you have parking lots that just generate heat.
Heat island, yes.
Thank you. Heat islands to sort of reduce those impacts and to get more fresh air and all that kind of good stuff. So yeah, that balance is a tricky one, but we need to think that through. And that's it.
Great, thank you, Dimitri. I'm glad you brought up streets, because I think what a link we want to make here is that our streets can be more than just places for cars, right? They can provide sort of an environmental function. So when we think about that planting strip, how is it bringing in stormwater, treating that stormwater, putting it back into our stormwater system? Like all of our streets can do a lot. They can wear a lot of different hats. And this is definitely an opportunity to kind of think holistically about the district, how it moves water, how it creates habitat, planting area, all of that. David, Tom, go ahead.
Hi, it's interesting on the north side of this map off of Industrial at Cherry Street. There are some interesting food-oriented businesses, breweries, etc., that have a great vibe. Ideally, those would be located closer to the biotech campus. and along the rail spurs where people could bike or walk easily to them. And as people described earlier, it would be a real magnet for others in the community to visit. And I'm just wondering, is there anything the city can do to encourage those types of businesses in the areas around the rail spurs?
I can answer that briefly, but then Lisa Costa Sanders, you should weigh in as well. Technically, so we're talking about a vision plan right now, right? So this is not zoning. We're not sort of codifying any sort of decisions about land use, but there's an intention that's getting put in place. So it's about goals. It's about sort of painting with a broad brush where certain types of uses would be encouraged that a follow-on, zoning effort could identify further.
Yeah, and we've had some conversations with the developers that are looking to develop in this area about having their amenities be open to the public as well. So if they're going to have any kind of food services, that be open to the public. And so I do agree with you. I like the breweries that are over there, and having them be in a different area where it could be a little more active and connected to other green spaces or connected to transportation, that would be beneficial.
Thanks, David. Anyone else? You can echo a comment you've already heard. You can bring up a question. You don't have to have an idea. We're taking questions as well. Hi, Sandy, I see you raised your hand. And then
Hi,
Roy,
well,
you can raise your hand. I'll call on you next. Okay. Sandy, go ahead.
just, seconding, we need housing there, mostly because there's not enough affordable housing. And also because, yes, the state wants to mandate multi-unit housing in all in every place, every residential zone, every R1 zone. So this really, I hope that there's housing involved in here. And then the trees, I just put in comments, but we've lost a lot of canopy here in San Carlos. We used to be much greener. We had more substantial trees. So many of them are gone, especially on San Carlos Avenue, but the city really needs to up their tree game, and hopefully residents will do it too. So trees, housing.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Roy, do you want to speak next? You can unmute yourself. I can unmute you as well. Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Yes, I've heard some wonderful ideas about this this development, and one thing that doesn't seem to be talked about very much is how is this all going to be paid for? A lot of these open spaces are going to take land which could be, could be profitable or useful for whatever industry is going to be there. But if it's not available for industry, then it means that many of the businesses that are currently there are either going to have to move out or are going to have to be paying a lot more money for a space to operate in. So I think it's, and this is something, of course, that the planning are going to have to look at very carefully, but it is a consideration. And, we may have a lot of nice dreams about things, but we do have to be practical as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Very good point. At the end of the day, this will have to be implemented. So it's something we all need to be mindful of as we vision. Any other verbal comments people want to give? Otherwise, Mark, I don't know if you've been tracking some of the chat, if there's any topics we want to zoom in. We could zoom in on the map.
We can. Something we haven't heard anything about in this session is views, preservation of views. There was a lot of discussion around the connection to both the mountains and to the bay, and the importance of having that connection to these main natural features. And I wonder if anyone wants to, if anyone has any thoughts on that or wants to echo the importance of preserving viewpoints and view corridors within the district.
Yes, there was a lot. People were commenting on the fact that, the hills are very visible from this plan area. It's like another way of connecting with nature, right? You're constantly sort of reminded of its presence, even though you're in this very industrial district. And that's kind of a powerful statement that San Carlos gets to make. Other parts of the peninsula don't really have that in the same way. David, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, just to comment on that, I know someone's already spoken about Pulgus Creek, but the views along that creek actually do include views of the mountains and toward the bay. And anything to move buildings back away from that would only make that a more desirable place to be and draw more people to use it.
Great, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the board just so that people can kind of read some of these comments, because I think they're sort of interesting to read back. And I do want to just let you know, obviously this is a virtual version of what we would have liked to do with you in person, right? So this would have been like a big poster that we would have had up on a table, and we would have all been sticking Post-its. So at the end of all of this, there will be an image made of the board, and you'll be able to look at these comments in more detail. So it's okay if you can't read everything, but maybe we can just sort of pull out a few to close out our session with. So obviously, like the environmental sort of condition, the legacy of environmental degradation, right? The sort of toxicity that's a result of all of this industry. How is that going to be addressed? That's something that's going to be looming large as we think about the vision and how this area develops forward. Some Post-its here along the rail spur. So thinking about this, maybe I know it's come up as a circulation point, but also thinking about it as a place for open space. You know, is there an opportunity for the businesses and the properties that are adjacent to it to utilize that space in other ways that provide, you know, greater benefit? Also thinking about, you know, what uses might be best to go there that could play sort of an open space or could have a strong relationship with future open space. The creek, of course, right? This is sort of a unique condition to find in an industrial district. And how do we sort of pay homage to that and bring it to the 21st century, bringing sort of sensible, much more sort of holistic thinking about ecology and flooding and sea level rise. All of these things are sort of mounting issues for us right now. It's kind of an existential crisis in a lot of ways. So this vision plan is really an opportunity to take a holistic look at that and think about the creek as a focal point of our district. What else? Mark, anything else that I'm skipping over?
There was discussion around open spaces of all different sizes. I thought that was really interesting. It could be a couple picnic tables, but it could be something more substantial. That's a more large communal green space. There's, of course, you know, this discussion around trade-offs, and you have to really think, if you want an open space, you have to understand, well, what does that mean from you know, removing of other amenities that may be important, or how does one pay for it? How does it get implemented? So a longer discussion around how do these parks get funded and built over time.
Oh, we have a hand up. So I'm just going to leave it on this image here so folks who haven't been able to see some of these precedent images can take a look. And David, go ahead.
Hey, on the note of the small outdoor spaces kind of peppered throughout, one example of that, which is thinking about how little green it is there, but how much I enjoy it, is downtown on Laurel Street, right across from Bank of America. Just that like tiny parklet with a few benches and just some trees and the little planters, like really, really small peanuts of green space. But the fact that it's cutting into that business district, which I like, but it's not very green. And just being able to sit there under a tree, not having to like go into a business and do that, like it's impressively impactful green space there actually is there. And so even just like a place to sit and breathe that isn't in a restaurant or in someone's house, something like that, I think it's a lot of bang for the space.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I think we all like have come face to face with that now in COVID, right? Like precious outdoor space has never been more precious. And just having a moment to just sort of be in nature, whatever that is, even if it's just a nice street tree with a shaded canopy, like that goes a long way.
And
for sure.
particularly the shared public space of it, you know, just being able to be in public, but also just sit. It's very nice.
Yes, absolutely. Great point. Thank you. All right, we've got 2 more hands. Brittany, go ahead.
Thanks. Actually, yeah, kind of similar to what David was just saying. One thing that I really like that San Francisco does is new developments, or not new anymore, but a lot of the newer buildings there have public spaces, you know, sometimes in the lobby, but often on top of the buildings. So there's a lot of really great spots in the financial district and in Soma, where there are public parks actually up on the roof. And that's a great place to take your lunch, to meet some friends, have a coffee. That could be another really interesting combination of some of what we've heard tonight too, you know, having great views of the bay. We're in a really great spot here for that. And just having places for people to congregate and get together. So kind of requiring, for those who aren't familiar, right, some developments, they're required to have a rooftop deck or kind of whatever built it into the building plan, so that the community can benefit from the footprint that they're taking up. So that could be something to consider for our town too. Thanks.
Thanks, Brittany. Great. All right, we've got 1 more hand. Scott, go ahead.
Okay, so talking about open space, one of the things that we've seen over the years is defining who is responsible for taking care of that space. And as much as possible, it should not be the city. The city is really good at putting open spaces in place or planting trees, but they're absolutely horrible about taking care of them. If you actually go down Industrial Road and you go north of Holly, you will see that the trees on the right-hand side are taken care of by PAMF, and the dead things that live on the other side are taken care of by the city. And they used to be trees. And so defining who is responsible for taking care of things and making sure that street trees have water to them. And not too much. And not too much water, because in some places, the water is, you know, overflowing the tree, and in other places there's no water whatsoever. So defining who is responsible for taking care of these open spaces and green spaces and public spaces, it needs to be really taken care of and defined. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Such a great point. And maybe our last point, because I guess our breakout rooms are going to close soon, but we need to be thinking, you know, how does this all come together? Who maintains it? How does it get taken care of? How do these trees and open spaces, how do we show them love? Like, we don't want these to be sort of withering away and not thriving. So there definitely needs to be a holistic plan in place, which is what this vision plan is aiming to do. So with that, it's 8 p.m. And to be honest, I don't know if we're just going to get the cord plugged or what's going to happen. So I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much for sticking around to the bitter end. I hope you found this activity